My name is Wendy Thomas, I'm 29 and I'm a registered nurse. When I was in a coma, my father told the doctor, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery." Tubes down my throat, my heart barely beating, I heard nothing. He said it the way someone cancels a subscription. No hesitation, no tremble. At 11:18 p.m. on a Tuesday, he signed a Do Not Resuscitate order. Not because the doctor said I couldn't be saved, but because the billing department told him the cost. That was all it took. A number. 3 weeks later, I woke up bruised and broken, barely able to lift my head. And I learned that the DNR wasn't even the worst thing he'd done while I was unconscious. What I did in the next 24 hours didn't just change my life. It shattered his. And he never saw it coming because he forgot one thing about me. Before I continue, take a moment to like and subscribe if this story resonates with you. Now let's go back 7 months earlier, the day my grandmother died, when everything started to unravel. I was born with a hole in my heart. A ventricular septal defect, the cardiologist called it. I was 4 when they opened my chest. 11 hours later, I was stitched back together. The bill took my mother 20 years to forget. My father never did. "Do you know how much you cost this family, Wendy?" he asked the first time I requested new sneakers at 8, while a stack of medical bills sat on the kitchen table. $214,000. That's what I cost. I didn't get the shoes. By 12, I stopped asking for anything. By 15, I was babysitting 3 houses just to pay for my own school supplies. At 18, I signed my first student loan alone, while my older sister Meredith packed for college with everything paid in full. Nobody questioned it. Meredith got a car at 16, I rode the bus. Meredith got tuition covered. I had a repayment plan. Meredith got birthday dinners. I got cake from a box and a card signed by my mother. And somehow I accepted it. I wasn't angry. I truly believed I owed them. My father had repeated it so many times. "You cost this family everything." That debt felt as real as the scar on my chest, something I carried every single day along with my nurse's badge. The only person who never mentioned the debt was my grandmother, Lillian Price. She lived alone in a small brick house in Norristown, Pennsylvania. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a creaky porch swing. She'd lived there for 41 years, raised my mother, buried my grandfather, and kept her garden alive through every winter. I started visiting her every Saturday when I was 23, fresh out of nursing school, drowning in student debt, and desperate for someone who saw me as more than a number. I would drive 40 minutes each way just to see my grandmother, bringing her groceries, checking her blood pressure, sitting on that porch swing, listening to her talk about everything and nothing. She never once said, "You owe me." Instead, she asked things like, "Tell me about your week, sweetheart. Did you eat today?" Near the end, her hands trembling, voice barely above a whisper, she said something I didn't understand at the time. "I've taken care of things for you, Wendy. When the time comes, a man named Kessler will find you." I smiled and squeezed her hand, thinking she was confused or that the medication had clouded her mind. He was 84, I assumed. My father hated that I visited her. "You're wasting gas," he'd say. "She doesn't even remember your name." That was a lie. Lillian was sharp until her very last breath. She remembered everything, including all the things my father wished she'd forget. She died quietly on a Thursday in March in that little brick house on Elm Street. My father organized the funeral. Small, quick, no fuss. He wouldn't let me read a eulogy. "Keep it short," he said at the funeral home door. "We're not making a spectacle." I stood in the back saying goodbye in silence, wondering about Kessler and the strange words she'd spoken. I had no idea what they meant, not yet. It would take a coma, a signed death order, and 4 days in a hospital bed for that name to matter. 3 months after Lillian's funeral, I was driving home from a 12-hour overnight shift. It was 4:17 a.m., light rain falling on Route 202. I remember glancing at the dashboard, calculating how much sleep I could squeeze in before my next shift. 6 hours if I skipped breakfast, 5 if I showered. I never made that calculation again. A pickup truck ran a red light 50 miles per hour, slamming into the driver's side of my car. The frame crumpled like paper. I don't remember the sound. I don't remember the glass. I was conscious for about 90 seconds after impact, long enough for the paramedic to hear me say my name. Then nothing. Traumatic brain swelling for broken ribs, internal bleeding. At St. Catherine's, my own hospital, the team got me into surgery within the hour. The bleeding wouldn't stop and they needed a second procedure, a specialist and authorization. I had no husband, no children. The emergency contact listed since I was 18 because of my father was Gerald Thomas. They called him at 10:30 p.m. He arrived at 10:47. I know the exact time from the front desk log. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't ask if I was in pain or scared. He went straight to the billing department. One question: how much is this going to cost? What happened next, I learned later from Patricia Walsh, would define the rest of my life. St. Catherine's head nurse, Pat, 28 years on the floor, voice rough as gravel, memory like a steel trap, was at the nurse's station when my father stepped out of billing and found Dr. Richard Hale, the surgeon in charge of my case. Pat heard everything. The second surgery, my father asked, "What's the estimate?" Dr. Hale told him, $180,000 to $240,000, depending on complications. Insurance would cover some, but my father, co-signer on my old account since I was 18, would be responsible for a large portion. He didn't flinch. "She doesn't have a healthcare proxy," he said. "I'm her decision maker." Dr. Hale followed protocol. Pat later told me he exchanged a careful nod with my father. And then my father said the words that would have ended my life. "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery." Pat later said Dr. Hale froze. He stared. My father didn't. "She's been a financial drain her whole life," he added. Then calmly he signed the DNR form. No hesitation, no trembling, just pen on paper. He asked if there was anything else he needed to sign and walked out. No visit, no glance through the glass, no goodbye. Pat stood there, knuckles white on the counter, wanting to scream, but instead she did something better. She opened my employee file. Every nurse at St. Catherine's fills out an emergency packet during onboarding, including a healthcare proxy. Most skip that section. I didn't. 3 years earlier, I had given my healthcare proxy to Deborah Owens, my best friend from nursing school, living 45 minutes away in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Name, phone number, relationship, clearly listed. Pat found it in under 2 minutes and called Deborah at 11:14 p.m. Deborah answered on the second ring. Pat explained the accident, the coma, the surgery needing authorization, and a father who had just tried to let his daughter die. Deborah didn't question it. "I'm leaving now," she said, and drove 90 minutes through the rain. She arrived at St. Catherine's at 12:51 a.m., carrying her license and a copy of the proxy form she had kept safe. Hands shaking, she revoked the DNR and authorized the surgery. Dr. Hale scrubbed in within the hour. My father was already asleep at home, unaware that the DNR had been overturned. As far as he knew, the machines would stop, and the hospital would call him with the news in the morning. Pat didn't call him. Deborah didn't call him. Nobody did. Pat did one more thing before her shift ended. She filed an internal incident report documenting every word my father had said, the times, the DNR signature, and the false claim that I had no proxy. She locked her computer and sat alone in the break room for 20 minutes. Gerald Thomas went home that night believing his daughter would be dead by morning and slept soundly. He had no idea that what he thought was final was already undone, and that the next day he would make his second mistake, the one that would cost him everything. I could imagine the catch in his voice, the hand over his chest, the thought running through his mind. We lost her. The injuries were too severe. But the call never came. Not because anyone told him I was alive. It just didn't come. And instead of calling the hospital himself or driving down to see his youngest daughter, Gerald Thomas spent that Wednesday doing something else entirely. He tried to steal my house. What I didn't know then, and wouldn't learn for weeks, was that my grandmother Lillian had already transferred the Norristown house into my name before she died. The deed was handled legally, filed at the county recorder's office. My father had no idea. What he did know was that the house was empty. He wanted it, so he made sure it was his. Using a power of attorney document with my signature forged from old medical forms I had signed as a teen, he went to a notary he trusted, got it stamped, and filed the deed transfer. By Thursday the house was in his name. By Friday he'd walked into a bank and pulled out $280,000 against it. The money didn't go to my medical bills or a savings account. It went straight to pay off gambling debts no one in our family knew existed. He didn't know the house was legally mine. He didn't know how it got there. And he had no idea about the man my grandmother had said would find me. Kessler. But forged signatures only hold up as long as no one looks too closely. And someone was about to. I opened my eyes on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the accident. The hospital light was harsh, flat, blue-white, too bright, too cold. I'd worked under that light for 6 years, but I had never been on this side of it before. My throat was raw, my ribs ached with every breath, my left arm was in a soft cast, and every movement, even blinking, felt heavy. The first face I saw wasn't my father's. It was Pat. She stood by the window, arms crossed, watching my monitors. When she noticed I was awake, she didn't gasp or rush. She pulled a chair beside me, sat down, and took my hand. Her grip was firm, warm. "You're safe," she said. "I need to tell you some things. Not now. When you're ready." I tried to speak. My voice was cracked, barely a whisper. "How long?" I asked. 3 weeks, she said. "Surgery went well. You're going to be fine." I closed my eyes again, not from fatigue but to remember how I had ended up here. The truck, the red light, the sound of metal folding. My father walked in at 2:17 that afternoon. The nurses logged it, I checked later. He froze in the doorway for a moment. I watched him carefully. There was a flicker in his expression, half a second before it shifted into something softer, something practiced. Fear of losing someone looks different from fear of being caught. He rushed to my bedside, grabbed my hand, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Oh, sweetheart, we were so scared. Thank God. Thank God you're okay." I looked at him, at the trembling lips, at the tears, and simply said, "Hi, Dad." That evening, Meredith sent flowers. A generic bouquet from an online florist. She didn't come. 2 days later, I could sit up on my own. Pat waited until the afternoon shift change, when the hallway was quiet and the door could stay closed without anyone asking questions. She pulled the same chair to my bedside but didn't sit right away. She stood for a moment, looking at me as if deciding where to start. "Just say it, Pat," I told her quietly. "Finally, Saturday, the night of your accident, your father came to the hospital," she began. I nodded. I knew he had claimed to be there every day, but Pat corrected me, he had only come once. That night, he spoke to Dr. Hale about the cost of my surgery, then told him I had no healthcare proxy and that he was the sole decision-maker. Then he signed a Do Not Resuscitate order. My hand stayed still on the blanket. "He signed a DNR. On you," I whispered. Pat nodded. "Yes." He said, "Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life." I closed my eyes, not out of shock but because the words finally gave shape to a truth I had always sensed. I had been a line item, a number on a never-ending bill. When I opened my eyes, I asked, "How am I alive?" Pat told me she had found my proxy in my employee file, Deborah Owens, who had driven through the night to authorize the surgery. "Is it on record what he did?" I asked. Pat nodded. "Incident report filed, time-stamped, everything." I stared at the ceiling for a long time, then asked for my phone. 32 missed calls from my father. 11 from Meredith. I ignored them and called a number my grandmother had given me months earlier. Kessler. The man on the line, calm and precise, listened as I explained I had just woken from a 3-week coma. Then he told me what my grandmother had done 2 years before her death. She had set up a private will notarized by his office, giving me the house on Elm Street and a trust with $85,000. No conditions, no one else involved. The documents had been probated 5 months earlier, and the deed transferred to my name. "Your grandmother said you'd call," Kessler added before we hung up. She said, "Wendy always comes through. Just give her time." In that 1 hour, everything fell into place. My father's lies, his theft, and the first step of my plan to take back what was mine. The phone rang less than an hour later. Kessler's voice was calm, measured, but there was an edge beneath it, the kind of tension that comes when someone sees something they didn't expect. "Miss Thomas, your grandmother's property was transferred out of your name 3 weeks ago," he said. I counted the drops in my foredrip, trying to steady myself. "Transferred to whom?" I asked. "Gerald Thomas, your father, using a power of attorney." I shook my head. "I never signed a power of attorney." "I know," Kessler said. "I have the original deed. No POA was ever authorized or recorded. This is forged. And there's more. A mortgage was recorded against the house 6 days ago. $280,000. I reached for the pen on my bedside table. My hand didn't shake. I wrote down every detail he gave me. The mortgage amount, the recording date, the lien holder, the notary stamp. "Do you want to press charges?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how deep this goes first." Then he added, Your grandmother left a letter for you sealed to be delivered only to you. I set the pen down. When can you come? Tomorrow morning 9. I'll be there. I hung up and wrote the DNR time down too, 11:18 p.m. from Pat. The next afternoon my father arrived with yellow roses and a Tupperware of banana bread Meredith had baked. He kissed my forehead and sat down, sighing as if carrying a weight. The doctors say you'll be out in a week, he said, squeezing my hand. We'll take care of everything. Meredith stood at the foot of my bed, checking her phone, her smile tight. We were so worried, she said. I watched the performance, the man who had signed my DNR now acting like a caring father. They stayed 40 minutes talking about the weather, the Phillies, and a small plumbing leak. Then they left. I waited 10 seconds, then called Kessler. When can you come? Bring the letter. The next morning he arrived, shorter than I imagined, quiet, in a gray suit with silver-rimmed glasses and a worn leather briefcase. He pulled a chair beside my bed, careful around the four. Your grandmother spoke about you often, he said. Every meeting she mentioned you. Kessler opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila envelope sealed with my grandmother Lillian's handwriting, addressed simply to me, Wendy. I carefully broke the seal and unfolded a single sheet of paper, her writing thin but steady. She had written it while she could still hold a pen. Wendy, I know your father will try to take everything over the years. My pension, my savings, things I never mentioned to avoid breaking the family apart. That was my mistake. Don't make it yours. The house is yours. The money is yours. Mr. Kessler has all the paperwork. Don't let anyone take what is yours. Not even your father. Especially your father. You are stronger than me, sweetheart. You always have been. I'm sorry I didn't say this while I could still hold your hand. I cried for the first time since the accident, not from weakness but because my grandmother had seen all of me and had quietly prepared for this moment with love. Kessler waited patiently and then set a thick folder on the blanket beside me. The original will, probate records, the deed transfer in my name, and the mortgage information showing my father's forged claim. You have everything you need, he said. What do you want to do? I wiped my face and sat up, ignoring the pain in my ribs. I want to do this right, publicly and before Sunday. Kessler raised an eyebrow. Sunday. I explained, our church's monthly gathering where my father as deacon never misses. 5 days after waking I was discharged, sore and slow but able to walk, think and make decisions. My father arrived at 10 a.m., suitcase in hand. You're staying with us until you recover, he said, not asking. I told him Deborah would take me. She had a spare room and had been my emergency contact for 3 years. His expression tightened but didn't fully register the proxy's role. He left without another word. That evening Meredith texted, Dad's upset. You're being ungrateful after everything he's been through. I read it, ignored it and called Kessler from Deborah's kitchen. Together we reviewed the timeline. Filings ready, court motion to void the fraudulent deed, police report for forgery, notification to the lender. Everything in order. Sunday came. That night my father called. I almost didn't answer but I did. His tone was casual, rehearsed even. Grandma Lillian's house. I've been handling the estate stuff. Don't worry about it. I'll explain when you're feeling better, my father said, testing me, seeing if I knew the truth. Okay, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Thanks for taking care of it. I hung up and placed the phone face down on the table. Deborah watched me from the doorway. How do you stay so calm? She asked. Practice, I said. 29 years of practice. First Grace Community Church was on a tree-lined road west of Philadelphia. Red brick, white steeple, a parking lot full by 9:45 every Sunday with about 120 people. Families, retirees, teachers, business owners. Everyone knew your name and your kids' names. My father, Gerald Thomas, had been a deacon for 15 years. Ushering, reading scripture, organizing men's breakfasts, shaking hands, asking after everyone's children, raising money for the roof, fixing furnaces for free, praised from the pulpit as a man of faith and sacrifice. Every first Sunday the church held a potluck in the fellowship hall. Folding tables, casseroles, paper plates, a microphone for blessings and prayer requests. Gerald always spoke about gratitude, family, and giving without expecting anything in return. And 120 people believed every word. This Sunday was the first Sunday of the month. I called Kessler Saturday evening. Can you be there at noon? I'll be there by 11:30, he said. I sat on Deborah's couch, ribs still aching, bruises fading from purple to yellow, walking upright but carefully. I wasn't planning a scene. I was planning a conversation, but with 120 people around, every conversation is a stage. Sunday morning, I woke at 7 and studied myself in the bathroom mirror. The bruises on my jaw and under my eye were fading, my collarbones still sore, a clear reminder of the accident. I dressed simply. White button-down shirt, black slacks. No jewelry except the small silver studs Lillian had given me for my 21st birthday. I pulled my hair back, washed my face, skipped makeup and grabbed the manila folder from the kitchen table. Copies of Lillian's will, the original deed, county records showing my father's mortgage, and the redacted incident report with his words on hospital letterhead. I slid it into my bag. Deborah drove us quietly. At 11:20, we turned onto the church road, parked near the back, the sun catching the steeple. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. I nodded, gripping her hand. "I've never been more sure. Whatever happens, I'll handle it. You'll be right outside." I nodded and stepped out of the car. Kessler was already waiting near the entrance, gray suit, leather briefcase, calm and steady, the kind of man who didn't rush, who measured time carefully. He saw me, gave a single nod. I walked through the church doors. The service was underway, hymns, warm air, the faint smell of coffee and old carpet. I slipped into the last pew. My father was in the front row. The moment he noticed me, his face lit up. The proud father, the devoted deacon, the man everyone admired for faith and sacrifice. He raised a hand in a wave. I gave a small, measured wave back. Meredith sat beside him, phone in hand, watching but not acknowledging me. The service ended at noon and everyone moved into the fellowship hall. Folding tables lined the room, fluorescent lights overhead, trays of baked ziti and green bean casserole, paper plates stacked neatly with napkins and a microphone at the front. Gerald was already by the mic, hands clasped, waiting for attention. 120 people settled, chairs scraping, children darting around. He tapped the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start with something personal today. As many of you know, my youngest daughter, Wendy, was in a serious car accident last month. She was in a coma for 3 weeks. The doctors weren't sure she'd survive." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But God is faithful. Today Wendy is here with us." He gestured toward me. Heads turned. Applause filled the room, warm and sincere. People pressed their hands to their hearts, nodded, smiled. Gerald's voice cracked slightly as he continued. "There is nothing more terrifying than almost losing your child. I prayed every single night. I never left her side." The words hit me like a lock turning, a truth I knew well. He had not been there. He wasn't at my side. "Family is everything," he added, looking at me, arms opening slightly in invitation. I walked toward him, calm, and said loudly enough for the first 3 rows to hear, "Dad, can I say a few words?" He smiled, confident, handed me the microphone, stepped aside with hands behind his back, playing the perfect supporting role. I gripped the mic, warm from his touch, and looked at the room instead of him. "Thank you all for your prayers. I'm grateful to be here, but I need to clarify something my father said. He did not pray by my bedside. He was at the hospital only once, the night of the accident. He did not check on me." The room went silent. Gerald's smile faltered, just slightly. He went straight to the billing department first, then spoke to my surgeon. I could feel my father shifting beside me, but I didn't look at him. He asked how much the surgery would cost, and when he heard, he said, "These are the exact words documented in a hospital incident report. Let her go. We won't pay for the surgery. She's been a financial drain her whole life." The room went silent. Not a comfortable pause, but one that pressed against every ear. Then he signed a "Do Not Resuscitate" order. Someone in the front row inhaled sharply. A woman covered her mouth, and I took a deep breath, knowing I was alive because of a colleague who found my healthcare proxy and called my friend in the middle of the night. That friend drove 90 minutes through the rain to authorize my surgery. Not my father, not my sister, a friend. Gerald stepped forward. "Wendy, stop. You don't know what you..." "I'm not done, Dad. This isn't the place. You chose a church to lie. I'm choosing this same church for the truth." He tried again. "You're confused. The medication..." "I have the hospital records right here," I said. The room held still. Nobody sipped water, checked a phone, or shifted in their seat. 120 people were watching, waiting. The side door opened. Donald Kessler walked in, gray suit, leather briefcase, calm, unhurried. He didn't search for a seat. He went to the front, placed his briefcase on a table, and stood next to me with the quiet authority of someone who had done this many times. My father looked at him, and for the first time in my life I saw real fear. Not anger, not offense, but fear. "This is Mr. Donald Kessler," I said into the microphone. He was my grandmother Lillian's attorney. A murmur ran through the room. Lillian's name carried weight here. She had attended this church for decades. My grandmother left me her house and her savings, all notarized and probated by the court 5 months ago, I continued. My father knew nothing. While I was in a coma, I added, my father forged my signature on a power of attorney, transferred the house into his name, and took out a $280,000 mortgage against it. There was a gasp. A dish clattered, a fork hit the floor. Gerald's voice rose, strained. "That's a lie. Eleanor left that house to the family, not just you." Kessler opened his briefcase, pulled out the original will, and held it so everyone in the front could see the notary seal. "I have the original will right here, Mr. Thomas. Your name does not appear anywhere on this document." Gerald looked at Meredith, who stared at the floor. I lowered the microphone slightly and spoke directly to my father, calm and steady. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Dad. I'm here because you tried to let me die, and when that didn't work, you stole from me. I know this is a lot, and if it's hard to hear, you're not alone. Thousands of people have shared stories like this. But if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the ending, and tell me in the comments what you would have said to him right there." Gerald turned to the room, jaw set, eyes searching for support. "She's on heavy medication," he said, trying to frame it his way, but no one flinched. His voice was tight but controlled. "She doesn't know what she's saying. This is a private family matter." Nobody answered. The room stayed frozen, arms folded, eyes focused. Then a man from the back spoke, a voice unfamiliar. "Then why is there a lawyer here, Gerald?" Gerald didn't respond. His gaze shifted to Pastor David, standing near the coffee table. The pastor said quietly, "Gerald, I think we should all hear her out." Gerald's posture shifted, a familiar tactic when authority challenged him. He softened, lowered his shoulders, let his voice break. "I sacrificed everything for this family. Wendy's medical bills nearly bankrupted us. I did what I thought was best. I didn't raise the microphone. I spoke clearly from where I stood. No, Dad. You did what was cheapest. There's a difference." He opened his mouth to speak again, then froze mid-sentence, realizing what he almost admitted. Meredith stood suddenly pale. "Dad, stop talking." He grabbed her arm. "Tell them, Meredith. Tell them I was trying to protect the family." She pulled free, looked at me, then down at the floor, then toward the door. "I can't do this," she whispered. As she passed, close enough for only me to hear, she said 6 words I will never forget. "I should have called Deborah myself." Then she was gone. The congregation was still watching me. I turned to them. "I'm not telling you this to destroy my father. I'm telling you because for 15 years he has stood here and told you who he is. Mr. Kessler filed a motion yesterday with the county court to void the deed transfer. It was based on a forged power of attorney I never signed. The bank that issued the mortgage has been notified. The loan is frozen. I filed a police report on Friday for forgery and fraud, including the notary who stamped your document. You will be required to return the $280,000, or you will face criminal charges." Gerald's voice cracked. "You'd send your own father to jail?" I looked at him without flinching. "You signed a paper to let your own daughter die. I'm not sending you anywhere. I'm giving you a chance to make it right. That's more than you ever gave me." Kessler closed his briefcase quietly. "The filings are already with the court, Mr. Thomas. This isn't a negotiation." Gerald slowly scanned the room, seeing every familiar face. Jim Callahan, whose pipes he fixed every winter. Susan Merritt, who brought him coffee after every service. Robert Dill, the deacon who stood beside him for a decade of fundraisers. None looked away, none moved toward him. He sat down heavily on a folding table, burying his face in his hands. Robert stepped forward to steady him. Robert put a firm hand on Gerald's shoulder. "I think you should leave," he said. Gerald stood slowly, his shoes silent on the floor, and walked toward the door. At the threshold he turned, eyes red, mouth open as if he wanted a final line that would land like all his practice speeches. But nothing came. He left. I set the microphone down on the nearest table. My hands were steady, my ribs sore, but I didn't care. I'm sorry for disrupting your Sunday, I told the room. My grandmother Lillian loved this church. She would have wanted the truth spoken here. 2 women came forward to hug me. A man I didn't know shook my hand silently. Pat, who had arrived before the service and stayed near the coffee station, caught my eye and nodded firmly. Then a small weathered hand touched my arm. I turned to see an older woman, white hair, glasses on a chain. I'm Doris Brennan, she said. Your grandmother and I sat together every Sunday for 20 years. He told me about you every week. She was so proud of you, Wendy. She never stopped talking about you. For the first time I felt seen in a world I thought ignored me. Within 24 hours, Gerald Thomas's world unraveled. Monday morning, the bank froze the mortgage, the lender's fraud department called Kessler, the title was flagged, the loan suspended. Gerald couldn't access the money, refinance or sell. The $280,000 he had already spent was gone, and the debt was now fully his. The county court accepted Kessler's motion to void the forged deed transfer, and a process server delivered the summons at 3:15 p.m., watched by a neighbor. Police launched a formal investigation into forgery and fraud, and the notary, Carl, hired an attorney and began cooperating. Gerald was alone. Church news spread faster than any sermon. He was asked to step down as deacon in a unanimous board vote. Robert Dill called him personally. Gerald didn't argue or show up. His plumbing clients, many church members, began canceling jobs. Jim Callahan texted, "Don't come to my house again." That night at 10, Gerald called me. "You destroyed me," he said flatly. "No, Dad," I replied. "You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He called Meredith next. She didn't answer. Then Kessler uncovered another of Gerald's schemes. 3 years earlier he had changed the beneficiary on my life insurance from Deborah to himself, forging my signature. His plan had left no space for me to survive. 3 days later Meredith called. I was on Deborah's couch, heating pad across my ribs, a cup of tea cooling beside me, finally feeling the weight of everything that had happened begin to lift. My phone buzzed. Meredith's name appeared and I stared at it for 2 rings before answering. "Wendy," she said, her voice thick, tearful. "I need to say something." "Then say it," I replied. She swallowed hard. "I knew about the DNR. I was in the waiting room when Dad spoke to the doctor. He told me what he planned and I didn't stop him. I said nothing. I let it happen." Her voice cracked. "And the house. I knew about that too. He promised me $85,000 if I stayed quiet. And I did. I stayed quiet, while you were in a coma. I listened." Her tears were loud now, messy like the way she used to cry when we were kids. Uncontrolled and raw. "I was scared of him, Wendy. I've always been scared of him. I know that's no excuse." "It's not," I said softly. Silence stretched. Then she whispered, "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it." "You're right. Not right now," I answered. Another pause. Her breathing was ragged. "But I'm not going to pretend you don't exist, Meredith. If you ever want to rebuild something with me without Dad's money, you know where to find me." A quiet moment passed, then she added something I didn't expect. "Grandma Lillian sent me a letter too." I sat up. She read aloud, "I love you, Meredith, but you are too much like your father. Choose differently." We both knew the answer before it was said. Forgiveness isn't owed. The door isn't locked, it's just closed. 1 month later, the deed to Lillian's house was officially back in my name. The court voided the fraudulent transfer on a Wednesday. Kessler called at 10 a.m. with the ruling. "Thank your grandmother," he said. Then he paused and added, "She would have loved watching you in that fellowship hall." Gerald faced criminal charges. 3rd-degree forgery, fraud, mortgage fraud. His attorney advised a plea deal. Probation, full restitution, no prison if he cooperated. He accepted. He had no choice. The evidence was solid and Carl, the notary, had already given investigators every detail. Gerald sold his house to repay the debt. It wasn't enough. The remaining balance would follow him for years. He moved in with his brother in Allentown. I heard the news from Meredith through a cousin. I didn't need to verify it. Meredith herself lost 2 real estate listings from church members but kept her license. She wasn't charged. People remembered, though. They always remember. I returned to work part-time at first. Pat rearranged the schedule so I only had day shifts for the first 2 months. She didn't make a big deal, she simply handed me the new rotation and said, "Welcome back, Thomas." On a Saturday in late October I drove to Norristown. I parked on Elm Street and walked up to the brick house with its creaking porch swing and slightly wild garden. I turned the key in the front door, my key, and stepped inside. The first thing hit me was the scent. Lavender. Calm, familiar, and completely home. The lavender sachets Lillian had tucked into every drawer and closet filled the house with her presence. Her photo sat on the mantel. Me and her on the porch swing, squinting at the sun. I don't remember who took it. I sank into her rocking chair, didn't turn on the TV, didn't check my phone. I just sat. For the first time I was in a home that belonged to me, not because I had earned anyone's approval, but because someone had loved me enough to make sure I'd be safe. I used to think being a good daughter meant absorbing everything my family threw at me. Every insult, every guilt trip, every time my father reminded me of what I'd cost him, I took it in and said, "Thank you." I thought that was what love required. Silence, gratitude, obedience. I was wrong. Setting a boundary isn't revenge. It's survival. And sometimes survival looks like a quiet man in a gray suit, a stack of notarized papers, and the courage to stand in front of 120 people and say, "This is what really happened." I don't hate my father. Hating him would mean he still controls me. He doesn't. Not anymore. He is a man who made terrible choices, driven by debts he couldn't admit and an addiction he was too ashamed to face. That doesn't excuse what he did, but it does mean I don't have to carry his weight anymore. If you see yourself in my story, in the guilt, the silence, the belief that you owe people who have hurt you, I want you to hear this clearly. You don't owe anyone your health, your home, or your life. My grandmother Lillian taught me that. Not with lectures, not with shouting, but with a letter, a house, and a lawyer named Kessler. I still go to church, by the way. Different church, same God, smaller congregation, friendlier coffee, and now I sit in the front row. Not to be seen, but because I'm done hiding in the back. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If Wendy's story touched you or reminded you of someone you love, leave a comment. Tell me, what boundary changed your life? I'd love to hear your story. And if you want more stories like this, check the description. I've got one waiting for you that might resonate even more. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next story.